talk through reporting sessions of care, reporting absences. And the last thing, and it's not a detailed one, but we'll also talk about how business continuity payments work, and then also reporting vacancies. In terms of questions, again, pop them into the chat and we'll answer them as best we can through the session. If we can't get to the actual question tonight, if it requires a little bit more detail, then we'll take it offline and we'll email the response out to you specifically on that one. So by the end of the session tonight, what we aim to, the questions that you should be able to answer post tonight's session is: what is a session of care? What is the information used for? Can I make changes to my session reports after it's submitted? How many absence days are allowed per child per CCS year? What happens when the absence limit is reached? And what's the maximum period of a child not attending a service before the enrollment ceases? So they're the broader questions that we should be able to answer after tonight's session. So kicking off, what is a session of care? So a session of care, by its very definition defined by the CCS the CCS handbook, is a session of care is the minimum period that a provider charges an individual a fee for providing childcare. Now, in real practical terms, what that means is what's the period of time that you're taking care of taking care of the children in your care. So that could be a session between, if your service opens at 7 a.m, it might be, say, from 7 to 5 p.m. So 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. would be like a 10-hour session. A 6 a.m. to a 6 p.m. session would be a 12-hour session. So that's specifically what a session of care is. The important thing to note here, though, it's not the actual period that the child attends a service, okay? So that when I mention that, we're talking specifically sign in and sign out times. So a child could be on a session of care that is between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m, which puts them on a 10-hour session. But if they attend your service on any particular day and they've signed in at 8 a.m. and finished at 4, that means they've only attended 8 hours of care that day. But when we're talking sessions of care, it's more around what was agreed to in terms of the care arrangement that you agreed to with the parents. So in most cases, it could be a 10-hour session, 12-hour session, or 11-hour session. Okay, so that's the important distinction. It's not exactly when a child is signed in or signed out. Now, a session of care can be any length up until 12 hours, but it can't exceed 12 hours. Where the care does extend beyond the 12 hours, you must submit it this must be submitted as 2 or more sessions of care for the same day. So in most cases, in an early education setting, you'll only have the 1 session of care where it's, when you open and whenever you choose to close, that will be your 1 session of care. But if it's more than 12 hours, and this might pertain to OSH services, where it's, you might have before school care, and if it runs to more than 12 hours, you might have a 7-hour session in the morning and a 7-hour session in the afternoon. That means you're reporting 14 hours for that day, but you can't report more. 1 session cannot exceed more than 12 hours in a day. Hope that makes sense. Now, a session of care can only be reported when the service is open and available to provide care, except when it's closed for a public holiday or a local emergency. Now, the considerations as a provider, you can help maximize a family CCS entitlement, maximize a family CCS that they achieve. Now, you can do that by adjusting the session of care. Now, the way to do that would be to adjust the hourly cap. So you might recall from week 1, the maximum hourly cap for school for non-school age children, so in an ELC or an OSH service, is $13.73. That's the maximum amount of CCS will pay per hour. So the way you would be able to maximize CCS for a family would be by adjusting the session of care, right? So let's say your daily fee is $150. If you put that family on a 10-hour session, that means their CCS per hour that would be based on is $15. Remember that the entitlement's only going to pay you based on the maximum hourly cap. So in this case, it'll be based on $13.73. The difference between $15 per hour and $13.73, or the $1.27, is an out-of-pocket expense for the family that they would have to pay for every hour within their session of care, right? So across a 10-hour session, they'd pay $12.70, well, $1.27 multiplied by 10, so $12.70 they would have to pay out of pocket for that day of care. If, however, your fee is still $150, but if you put them on an 11-hour session, it's $13.63. Okay, so that's below the hourly cap. So then your CCS is based on a calculation of whatever the percentage entitlement is multiplied by $13.63. Okay, so you can influence it that way. So the only thing that you need to balance off though is families is the other side, where how many hours of subsidized care are they eligible for within that fortnight. So again, a child that attends 10 days across a fortnight at 10 hours, that's 100 hours that they're using. Okay, so and again, remember the maximum number of hours any family can get, unless they're on ACCS, is 100 hours per fortnight, right? So you can tweak this, but to maximize CCS for families, but you have to offset that by, or have in the back of your mind that if I adjust the amount of hours, I may be influencing the amount, you will have an impact on the amount of subsidized care a family can have across the fortnight. So hope that makes sense. So number one, you can influence it to maximize CCS, but just balance that off with how many hours of subsidized care they have across a fortnight. So let's talk about reporting sessions of care and why it's important. But look, the crux of why it's important is so that CCS or ACCS is paid accurately based on agreed sessions of care, agreed hours of care, right? So it's accurate and timely sessions reports enable Services Australia to correctly calculate the amount of CCS or ACCS that is payable for care provided to a child. The flip side is inaccurate sessions of care means that the families could be paying additional they could be paying additional out-of-pocket expenses if we get this session of care wrong, and they're not maximizing the amount of CCS they get. So why it's important? It's to pay CCS accurately, other than the fact that it's just a requirement under family assistance law that you report sessions each week. How you report it. So that's probably the most simple one in this thing. It's sessions of care reported through your childcare software or the PEP, the provider entry point. Now, CCS can't be paid until a session report is received. Okay. Now, a session report must be submitted for each child for each week a session of care has been provided. Now, that includes absences as well. So if the child is due to attend 3 days this week and they're absent one particular day, then you need to report that absence as well. So it'll be reporting the three days of care they attended to and one absence. Okay, because CCS is still applicable to be paid when you submit absences if you charge a fee. If you charge zero, then again, CCS is based on how much your fee is. So if you charge zero, then CCS won't be applicable for that day. But if you charge for absences, CCS is still applicable to be paid for that session. Now, in terms of when, session reports must be submitted within 14 days after the end of the week when the sessions were provided. Okay. Now, in practical terms, I've never seen CCS not take a session not receive a session, pay out CCS if you're beyond the 14 days. Now, you may get a CCS breach notice, number one, but you can always go back to the beginning of the CCS year, so long as it's not locked out that period. And they only usually lock out the previous CCS financial year after a certain amount of time. But you can always go back to the beginning of the CCS year and submit sessions as you need. If you know, you can also withdraw them. You can also modify them as well, just to make sure that the families have received the right amount of CCS. The only thing that they request though is if it's beyond 14 days, is that you put a reason why you're either varying the change or you're just submitting a new session now. And that could be for administrative reasons. Families haven't provided you a CRN up until this point. So you can, like I said, you can go back and submit sessions. Ideally, you do it within 14 days. Within 14 days, you don't need to provide a reason as to why it's late. Beyond 14 days, you do need to provide a reason. Okay, but I've never seen it in the years that we've been helping services submit CCS sessions, that you can always go back to the beginning of the CCS financial year and submit sessions as you're required. You just need to provide a reason as to why their sessions are late. Now, there are obviously exceptions or reasons why you're not able to submit sessions within the 14 days. And a couple of the reasons are a provider or service was not yet approved or was suspended on the day the child's enrollment started. Now, in this case, the session report must be provided within 7 days after the end of the week in which the approval was provided or the suspension was revoked. Okay, so if you're a new provider and you haven't been approved, or if your CCS has been revoked, then after you've been approved, or if it's or the suspension has been revoked, then you've got 7 days to submit sessions. Okay. Now, the second reason is a provider has received a business continuity payment because it's unable to provide session reports, such as because access to the system is down. And in this case, session reports must be submitted within 14 days after it becomes able to submit reports. So if you had no access to your childcare software or the PEP was down, then it does give you, as soon as it becomes available again, you've got 14 days after that to submit your reports. So guys, why it's important to pay CCS accurately. How do you do it? Do it through your CCS software or via the PEP. 14 days. You've got to do it within 14 days of that session of care being provided is ideal. As I said to you though, but in the years that we've been administering this, you can always go back to the beginning of the CCS financial year. You just have to provide a reason as to why it's late. So hopefully that makes sense. Now your session report, I won't go too far into this, but the session report has to have this, the table that you see is the minimum amount of information that needs to be provided on each session report. Okay, so has to have the start and end date, the session details, including the start and finish times, the attendance time, so the actual in and out time. So we submit, again, if you're using a childcare software, we submit two things in terms of time to the department. We submit the session of care, which is what CCS is based on, but we also submit the sign in and out times for services as well. Now, if it's an absence, we also submit that, and we'll go into some of the reasons. But again, every time there is an absence, guys, and if you need CCS to be paid, then it's always advisable to put down an absence reason of why that child didn't attend for that week, because again, we'll touch on this when we talk on absences, but there's a maximum amount of 42 days in absences now that a child can have within the CCS financial year, but you are allowed additional absences for varying reasons, and we'll go into that in a couple of slides time. The actual fee charge for that session, any other subsidies paid to the provider, whether it's family daycare or in-home care or a preschool program. So the key elements of any session will contain these. As I said to you, when you're submitting sessions via, if it's us, if it's Quick Kids, Explore, this kind of stuff happens automatically. This information gets submitted on your behalf. I'm unsure about how it gets submitted via the PEP, but I believe you still have to put things like the actual hours, signed in, sign out times, and the actual session of care, obviously the child's details as well. So at minimum, this is the information that gets sent across. Now, in terms of varying, withdrawing, or updating session reports, so now if as the provider you realize the session report that you've submitted is incorrect for whatever reason, you can vary or withdraw the report up until 28 days after the start of the week to which the report relates. Okay, so all in all, what it means is you have up until 28 days after that session. So if you submitted sessions last week, for example, you have 28 days to modify it or vary it. Again, in real practical terms, I've never seen it that you can't withdraw or resubmit sessions up until the beginning of the CCS financial year. Okay, again, what's important is the reason why you're either withdrawing or you're modifying it. Because every time you withdraw a session, it'll ask you for a reason. Again, it could be an administrative error. It could be you wanted to update the session of care itself. Like, say families were on a 12-hour session, but they were meant to be on a 10-hour session. You can go back and you can adjust these. The advisable thing here is that the department asks you to amend those within 28 days. From my experience, we haven't seen it that they've locked you out from varying that. And we have seen in the system where it actually goes, you're allowed to go back to the CCS financial year to modify them. So look, if you take anything away from that, try to vary your sessions within 28 days of the session. But as I said to you, my experience tells me you can go back a bit further than that. Now, there are some reasons as to why you need to vary or withdraw a session. So the main one is usually administrative error. So you kind of use this where there was a mistake made in the original session report. For example, incorrect session start time or an incorrect parent CRN. Maybe you should have been claiming under the other primary carer. Sorry, not the other primary carer, the other carer, as opposed to the carer that you submitted under. You can also vary on a session based on, you're responding to a carer's dispute where the parent has disputed a session report. So again, one of the things that parents usually see on either their invoice each week or a statement of entitlement is they might see the amount of care. So they say, it shouldn't have been reported as a 12-hour session. It should have been reported as a 10 or an 8. You can go back and that's a valid reason as to why you would vary or withdraw a session report. The last reason is kind of very general. So a general amendment, you kind of use this where changes are being made before the Sunday night of the session report week. So most services, you guys, if you have software, most software providers submit it on the Friday night of the given week. What happens is CCS take all that information in and they process it on Sunday night. Now, if you needed to make modifications before it gets processed by CCS on the Sunday, I think it kicks off at Sunday 9 p.m. at night, guys. If you found an error on the Saturday and you needed to modify that, you can withdraw that session or you can submit an update. And that, again, you just need to be able to do that. So in terms of that's what they call a general amendment. So just before it gets processed on Sunday night at 9 p.m. So you can make adjustments to that. So in terms of just recapping this slide particularly here, guys, if you need to vary, withdraw, or update a session, it's advisable to do it within 28 days of the session. And the three main reasons are administrative error, you're responding to a carer's dispute, or a general amendment is the reasons why you would need to withdraw or modify a previously submitted session. Now, I talked about absences earlier. Now, reporting absences, so CCS is payable for up to 42 absence days for a child in a financial year. But only for days that the child would normally attend care and get CCS, okay? So if a child is booked in for 3 days and they're absent one of those days, CCS is payable for those days if it's within the 42 days. If they were sick on any other day, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but they were sick on the Thursday, then no, and they weren't due to attend your service, that Thursday is not payable, right? Because they weren't due or booked in to attend your service. There is, the caveat to that is if they were originally booked in from Monday to Wednesday and they were going to take a casual day in for that week and they were going to attend that day on the Thursday, and then you are going to charge them that fee despite the fact that they booked a casual day and they don't attend, you can claim CCS for that day, but it will go down as an absence for that week as well. Okay, so that's the only caveat to that. But typically, if it's an absence, if they're due to attend your care, if you charge a fee, then you can claim CCS for that. Again, maximum amount of days is 42 days. Now, a reason or evidence doesn't really need to be provided for the initial 42 days. And we're going to go into the next slide. We're going to talk about the additional absence reasons. And again, you can claim for CCS for absences beyond 42 days. You just have to have a valid reason as to why. Now, in shared care arrangements where separated parents both claim CCS for that child, the 42 absences are allocated to the child, not the individual parent. What this means, guys, is child John Smith, parents are Martha and Jacob. If John Smith has 21 days that's been registered under Martha and 21 days registered under Jacob, it still counts as 42 days. You don't get 42 days with Martha, you don't get 42 days with Jacob, it's with the child. Okay, so it's in aggregate. The way that CCS measure that is based on the child's CRN. Okay, so that's how they count total numbers of absences for a child. So it's absences are attached to the child, not specifically the parent that's claiming CCS on their behalf. So 42 days, guys, is without specific reasons. In terms of the child's absences, so you have 42 days. You can, those 42 days are attached to the child. It's not specifically related to the actual carer itself that's claiming CCS. Now, there are reasons for additional absences, and these are the 8 that we've got listed there. So in terms of additional absence reasons, the rule of thumb here, guys, is to have evidence that if you're going to try to claim CCS for any absences beyond 42 days. So the reason number 1 is the child, the individual who cares for the child, the individual's partner or another person with whom the child lives with is ill, and the service has been given medical certificate by a medical practitioner. So if the parents or the guardians of that child is ill and they can't get to care, you just need to be able to supply a medical certificate for the parent or the guardian. That's acceptable as an additional absence reason. The child attends preschool on any given day. Alternative arrangements have been made on a pupil-free day. That's probably more pertaining to OSH services. So again, that is a valid reason for an additional absences. The child has not yet been immunized against an infectious disease. Now, the absence occurs during an immunization grace period, and a medical practitioner has certified that exposure to the infectious disease would pose a health risk to the child. So, all in all there, guys, is if the child hasn't been immunized against an infectious disease, and they have a medical certificate from a medical practitioner advising that the child would have an adverse effect to immunization, then that again is another additional absence reason. The absence is because the child is spending time with a person other than the individual who is their usual carer, as required by a court order or a parenting plan, and the service has a copy of the relevant court order or parenting plan for that child. So again, the main rule of thumb here, guys, is when you report an absence, if you have evidence to support why that child is absent, and particularly if they're beyond the 42 days, then in owner, you tick a box and says, yes, I have the evidence for this, and you select a specific reason as to why they're not attending. I imagine the PEP has something in place for that as well, but I also imagine that all your other software providers have something very similar there, where you can say, yes, I've got evidence, and two, that you've got a record of that evidence if you're asked to present that. Now, this goes back to varying session reports as well. So I'm going a little bit off topic here, but it's related. So let's say you get down closer towards the end of the CCS year, the families reach 42 absences. They don't have any specific reasons as to why they might be sick again beyond the 42, or they might have reasons as to why they need additional absences. They may then come back with a dispute saying, 6 months ago, my child actually wasn't sick on this day, or they were sick, but here's evidence as to reason as to why they were. They might say, my child actually wasn't sick. Why did you report an absence? They actually clearly attended, things like that. That's why you would go back and you would vary that session. So the reason I mention that now is the main reason why we're talking about sessions of care, right? Is reporting it accurately and timely so that CCS is paid accurately each time. So on the topic of absences, you can always go back and say, okay, this child actually did attend. It's not an absence. This is the updated session. So you can actually go back and do that. The next reason why the service, for additional absence reasons is the service is closed as a direct result of a period of local emergency. So that pertains when, we have the floods or fires and services just have to close during that period. So again, that is a valid reason as to why the child's not attending care. CCS is still applicable. The child cannot attend because of a local emergency, as I just said before. The individual who cares for the child has decided that the child should not attend the service for up to 7 days immediately following the end of a period of a local emergency. Look, what you take out of the last 3 points is if there's a local emergency, that's a valid reason as to why a child may be absent from attending their regular care with you as the provider. But key takeouts out of this, guys, is have evidence where possible, and when you're reporting that absence to CCS, and in a local emergency, if they can't make it to the service, if you're closed, it's still a valid reason as to why you can exceed the standard 42 days. Now, if services discount fees when the child is absent, the discounted fee must be reported. So some services choose to apply discounted fees when children are absent. Now, the flexibility is strongly encouraged, and providers should consider this possibility when charging fees for days when children are absent. If the fees are discounted, it's important to report the discounted fees to the department so that the correct CCS can be calculated based on the actual fee the parent is charged for that session. So if you usually charge $150 for that session, CCS is usually paid based on the $150 or the hourly rate of the $150. But if you choose to charge and give that parent a discount because the child was absent, so let's say you did it at half, at $75, what CCS is asking you to do is report the $75, not the $150, because the CCS is actually then paid on the $75. So if they have a 50% entitlement, it'll be paid on 50% of the 75, not the 150. They want the actual discounted fee. Okay, so if you guys decide to go down the path of reducing fees for absences, the requirement by the department is you submit, say, in this scenario, $75 as opposed to $150. But it's whatever the discounted fee that you've decided is the fee that they want you to report for that session. This one's always a little bit of a funny one, and it kind of usually catches people off guard, guys. So it's absences outside of the first and last days of care. Okay. So generally, CCS will not be paid for absences where a provider charges a family to reserve a place for a child who has not yet physically started. So if my child was due to attend, say, Monday next week, but I've already registered with your service for the 2 weeks ago, I'm not going to be able to claim CCS for since I enrolled at your service. CCS will only start paying when my child physically attends your service for the very, very first time. So let's say my child was due to attend next Monday. So I'm booked in for, say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. This is the very first time. Come next Monday, if my child's absent, CCS, although, you know, the child's been booked in, CCS won't pay me for that first Monday, even though I'm booked in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because CCS will only start kicking in and paying from the first physical attendance. So if then my child attends on the Tuesday as their very first day, I will then receive CCS for Tuesday and Wednesday onwards. It won't pay me for the Monday. Now, that goes back to your discretion around whether or not you charge me for that Monday or not, or you discount the fee. But CCS, if I was booked in, going by the specific rules, if I was booked in for the Monday, I don't attend the Monday, I won't get CCS for that. As a parent, I'm up for paying full fee for that very first day. Then I'll get CCS on the Tuesday and I'll get CCS on the Wednesday. So, okay, so the key takeaway there, guys, is CCS will only start paying me from the very first physical attendance. The flip side happens at the end of when a child chooses to leave your service. Okay, CCS will only ever pay you on the child. So the basic rule is a child needs to attend the very last session that they're booked in for in order to not have any kind of CCS retract. Okay, so if my last day is this Friday and this Friday, and the last time I attend is, say, Wednesday, but I was booked in for the Thursday, CCS won't pay me for the Friday or the Thursday. They'll pay me for the last day, physical day that I attended. That'll be the Wednesday. Okay, so again, I might be booked in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and you've charged me for it. But if I don't attend, or my child doesn't attend on the Friday, and the child doesn't attend on the Thursday, and the last physical day that I attended, or my child attended, was the Wednesday, CCS will only pay me CCS for that up until that Wednesday. That's the key one to take out of that, right? Because what happens is you might submit the session at the end of that week, and you might get paid CCS for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But as CCS goes through and says, hey, hang on, the child didn't attend on the last 2 days, what they do is they end up retracting CCS from you. Okay, so that's, they'll take back the Thursday and the Friday. So that's the key one. The key takeaway there is, the two key takeaways there is CCS will only pay on the first time that you attend, on the first physical day that you're there, despite the fact that you're booked in, and will only pay you up until the last physical day that you're at your service. So what we generally advise is parents to attend their first day and attend their last day to remove the risk of having any CCS retracted. Now, there obviously are reasons as to why families may not be able to attend the first or the last day, and these are the specific reasons. A child or someone they live with is ill. A service has changed ownership. Usual service is closed and the child is attending a different service under the same provider. A family tragedy, or the enrollments was seized incorrectly. So CCS again will pay you, but we have to be very specific about the reasons as to why they didn't attend on their first or their last day of care. Long absences. If a long absence from care is anticipated, so if they're going on holidays, The plan for this and how it will be managed can be specified through a CWA. So you can go through and adjust a period and say, hey, this family's not attending for, you can book out that period. So you can just not put any bookings through and you can update your CWA to do that. Now, however, where a child doesn't attend a service within 14 weeks or more, the enrollment will be seized, even if the absence was planned in a CWA. So if you're not submitting any sessions within a 14-week period, the enrollment for that child will automatically be seized. What happens when an enrollment is seized is that if that child ever came back to your service, you'd have to reactivate that enrollment. Parents will then have to go through and reconfirm that enrollment again. Okay, so if you're not submitting a session in a 14-week period for a child, the child's enrollment automatically ceases. Now, if a long absence is planned, the family may prefer to end the enrollment and submit a new enrollment notice when their child's due to go back. So if they do that, then, so I'll start again. For short breaks, families can use the 42 days of absences without any kind of question, okay? Where it's a little bit longer than 42 days, remember CCS will only pay you up until the maximum of 42 days of absences. If it's gonna go beyond that, what families could do is kind of end the enrollment with you. And then if they're going away for say 6 months, then they come back and then they restart an enrollment, that won't count towards their absence count because they've actually cut it off before they left. Obviously, the implication there is that if they stop the enrollment, then they can't claim CCS for any period that they're away for. Okay. Now, there was a new rule that was put in place from July 2022. Children who have not attended a session of care in 26 weeks will lose their CCS entitlements. If a child starts to attend care again, a family will be required to lodge a new claim for CCS. So now this is very different from the 14 weeks of not submitting care. So if a child goes beyond the 14 weeks and they get to 26 weeks of no attendance at a care service, the parent's going to have to go through and reapply for CCS. Okay. So in the scenario where it's just 14 weeks where they haven't attended, all families have to do, so the enrollment will cease. You just have to reactivate the seized enrollment. Parents confirm it in MyGov, same entitlements get applied to that child. If it reaches 26 weeks, the enrollment or the entitlements is actually automatically cancelled by CCS and they have to go through the whole application process again. Okay. So that's, excuse me. Now, the importance of that is this. Families may also lose higher subsidies for subsequent children. So back in March 2022, the government introduced higher subsidies for families who have 2 or more children aged under 5 in early care, with their CCS rate increasing by 30% for their second child up until a maximum of 95%. Now, if the older sibling has not attended care for 26 weeks, Services Australia will reassess all other children in the family to determine the new standard rate for the child. Okay, so effectively what that means is if the older sibling doesn't attend for 26 weeks, their entitlements are cancelled, then what they'll do is they'll end up going back to readjust the second child's CCS. So if they were getting up to a maximum of 95, then 30% automatically drops off. Okay. So long absences, generally, look, again, they have 42 days of absences. If they want to claim CCS while they're away for whatever reason, then you can. It's advisable that if they're going to take a longer break than that, please let them know about the 14-week rule around the enrollment automatically ceasing. They'd have to reapprove it in MyGov when they get back. But if it goes beyond 26 weeks, the entitlements are just cancelled altogether. They have to go back through an application process for CCS upon their return. So that's just sessions of care. That's sessions of care. Look, in terms of the other matters that I just wanted to cover quickly tonight. Reporting actual in and out attendances. So providers are required to provide actual sign in and sign out times. It's not used for calculating session calculations, but for parents to understand the relationship between fees charged, amount of subsidy, and out-of-pocket expenses. So it's more informative for parents. Like again, if they see that they're only attending between 8 and say 4, and you can put them on a session of care if they want to take up more days of care and things like that. So sessions of care is important in that regard for families to kind of plan how much care they want to be able to utilize, or subsidize care to utilize over the fortnightly period. So again, reporting actual signing in and out times is not specifically required to calculate CCS. It's more an informative thing for parents, but again, the department do want to see those sign in and out times as well. Vacancies. Now, vacancies are, so again, you do this through your software, or you can report it via the PEP, but this input, all your vacancies and fees go into Starting Blocks, the Starting Blocks website. So that's how you kind of go through and report vacancies. Now, that's specifically, there's not much more to go in on vacancies, but there is a requirement for you to submit vacancies at the end of each week. It goes up in Starting Blocks. Again, Starting Blocks, if you don't know what it is, it just provides, it's an information site that provides families a bit of information around where childcare might be available. So that's why it's important, so that they can see the fee and whether or not you've got any availabilities on there. Business continuity payments. So business continuity payments may be made if a situation that arises beyond the control of you as the provider, and that prevents you from submitting session reports. So again, the easiest one to think about is COVID. And this is where the business continuity payments kind of kicked in. You weren't able to submit sessions because children just didn't attend care during that in that period, right? So now the other examples that you might consider are just kind of local area emergencies. In Australia, obviously, so in Sydney, we have to deal with floods and fires and things like that. And again, that's applicable to your state. But a disruption to the operation of communication infrastructure, the service cannot be rectified by the end of the relevant period where the service is significantly affected by a natural disaster or pandemic, such as COVID-19, flood, storm, fire, or earthquake. So anything that prevents you from being able to submit sessions or having children attend your service, it's more eligible for a business continuity payment. So business continuity payments are intended to allow a service to continue operating until electronic reports can be provided. Payments made in this way should be still passed to the parents as fee reductions. Once the provider is able to provide session reports again, any business continuity payments will be offset against CCS payments. Now, the amount to be paid will be based on the average weekly amount paid to the service during a similar previous period. For example, a similar number of children and similar time of year, known as a test period, the amount of the weekly payment will be rounded to the nearest $100. So in order to make an estimation of the business continuity payment, they'll take a sample period, and they'll say, okay, at this same period of time, you had 50 children, we paid you CCS of 25,000, we'll pay you 25,000. What they expect from you is once you're able to submit sessions again for a period, then you just submit them. Now, that's how they base the continuity payments. We talked previously why it's important about creating enrollments for each child that comes in the previous week. So whether they're under a PA arrangement or whether they're under an RA, it's important to have all children enrolled with an enrollment notice, so that when CCS do these calculations about what your business continuity payments should be, they take that into consideration. Okay, so that's why it's important to have enrollment notices created for every single child at your service. Now, if the service is new and there is no payment history to establish a test period, the amount will be 50% of 50 hours of care for the estimated number of children in care for the week at for the week at the CCS hourly rate cap for that service. So if you're a new service and there is no test period, CCS will base it on 50% of 50 hours of care for the number of children you have at your service. That's what they'll base that on. Now we've gotten to the end of it. We only covered sessions of care tonight, but just to quickly recap, a session of care is the minimum period that a provider charges an individual a fee for providing childcare. Sessions of care are used to calculate CCS. Providers can vary or withdraw sessions up until 28 days after the start of the week the report relates to. Again, as I've said to you before, I have seen you go back beyond the 28 days, but look, the only thing I can do is advise that if you are going to vary or modify your sessions, try to do it within the 28 days. Now, children are given 42 allowable absences each year. CCS can only be claimed when the service is open and able to provide care unless closed due to public holiday or local area emergency. Thanks, guys. That's in terms of what we've recovered. Sorry, what we covered tonight is obviously sessions of care, how they work, why you need to report them, why it's important to report on them accurately. In terms of, we've only got 2 sessions together. Thank you again for coming back. For those that are re-attending. Next week's session, we're going to be covering how CCS is paid. So we're going to be talking about entitlements, payments, and reconciliations. And then the following week, just before Christmas, we're going to talk about record keeping and notifications. And we might just do a quick recap of the actual course itself. Thank you, everyone, again, for attending tonight. It did feel a little bit dry tonight because we're only talking about sessions of care, but I do promise you that by the time we get through to next week, it'll all start to come together. Okay, so thank you again, my friends. This recording will be available at just after 8 o'clock tonight. If you did miss anything, the notes are available. Thanks again, guys. And other than that, I'll see you again next week. Thank you.